morning campers, how the devil are you? As you can see today, I'm walking down by the river again, and it's a gloriously sunny day. Still a bit of a chill in the air when the sun goes behind the clouds. Suitably attired to get some vitamin D onto my white arms, and no hat. Wish I had some decent sunglasses though, because it's very bright. So here we are. Now, I'm going to start today's little discussion with some questions. Call it a quiz if you like. Let's have a little bit of a quiz. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to answer each question. Think to yourself and think about what you think the answer might be for each one. Okay, so let's start. So I'm going to talk about the 3 people in my little close family: my mum, my brother and my sister. Okay, and that's going to be your choice of 3 answers each time: my mum, my brother or my sister. So the first question is, who do you think I would turn to if I wanted to know information about the best tractor to buy for my farm? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, who did you say? Okay, if you guessed my brother, then you were correct. Why? Because he was a dairy farmer most of his life. Who would I ask if I needed to know the best bike, sports bike for racing? My mum, my brother or my sister? 3, 2, 1. Who did you guess? You said my sister. You'd be absolutely right. She's raced motorbike and sidecars for several years now and been quite successful at it, with her husband, of course. Okay, next question. Are you ready? I'm not. It's always good to come well prepared to a discussion like this. So in the meantime, I'll just walk along like an idiot, holding a stick with a phone on the end, talking to myself, trying to work out what it is I'm meant to be talking about today. Okay, let's think about it. Quick. Okay, next question. Who do you think I would not turn to for advice about parenting? 3, 2, 1. Who did you guess? Actually, the answer is my sister. Married, no kids. My mum obviously had us 3, and my brother has 2 little bundles of joy. Okay, let's think about the next question. Oh, it's lovely today. It really is nice. Hope this is like going to be a really nice spring. Who do you think I would not turn to if I was interested in starting a craft, a beading or knitting or anything like that? Who do you think I would not turn to for advice about that particular hobby or group of hobbies? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, yes, you were right. My brother, my mum and my sister are both into that and bounce off each other with things that they've made and creative ideas. Okay, the next question is, who do you think was the most recent person to organise and set up a Zoom video call with me? My mum, my brother or my sister? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You might have been wrong there. That was my mum. In fact, I don't think I've ever received a Zoom call that's been set up by my brother or sister. So, there you go. There's the starter questions. Okay, so I know the question that's brimming on your lips is, why was I asking those questions at the start of my walk, or halfway through my walk maybe? Why was I asking you those questions? Well, think about your answers. How did you actually choose what your answer would be? Maybe you imagined that my brother would be the most likely one to have an interest or knowledge about motorbikes. You were wrong. Maybe you did correctly assume that my mum and my sister were the ones that I would ask about getting into crafting, and then you would have been right that my brother wouldn't be the one that I would ask in that situation. Another question could be, who do you think I would ask out of the three of them? Who would be the one that would have the most knowledge about forestry, chopping down trees, being a lumberjack, and that whole industry? Again, you might have assumed that it was my brother, but it was actually my sister. So we make these assumptions every day. And how do we make assumptions? Well, we base our assumptions on the pool of knowledge that we've acquired throughout our lives already. And we know that generally more guys are interested in motors, motorsports, motorbikes than women. Not all, of course, but most. So we make these generalizations all the time based on the facts that are available to us and the knowledge that we've gained throughout our lives. People, friends, family that we've encountered throughout our lives. We find out information about them, we get to know them, and we then base our opinions about the number of people that do certain things or are more attracted to certain activities based on that knowledge. So why are we talking about that today? Why am I talking about that today? Well, in a way, in some respects, making generalizations about other people is just human nature. As I said, we base it on information that we've gleaned, and we make assumptions. It's not wrong to make assumptions. It's not wrong, for example, to assume that more black people than white people are going to stay skin cancer free throughout their lives, simply because I imagine that they have a higher level of melanin pigment in their skin, which makes them darker coloured, and therefore they are naturally better protected against the harmful effects of the sun's rays. He said, walking along with his arms out in the sun, despite a nip in the air. But you know, my doctors have told me that I'm short of vitamin D, and in fact prescribed me with quite high doses of vitamin D pills that I've got to take, capsules that I have to take once a week until my body rights itself again. One of the downsides to living in Manchester, where it's predominantly cloudy, and England in general, where we don't don't get as much sun as some other places. Yeah, so that kind of way of looking at things extends into every aspect of life. You know, every single person on this world, on this planet, thank God, is different to every other one. People do form into different groups. You know, I'm not just picking on one particular group here. I'm talking about all manner of groups. Whether it's what sex you are, you know, you're predetermined by the nature of our DNA and our genes to have a certain way, generally, of looking at things or be capable of certain things. You know, your mental and physical abilities are going to be different whether you're a man or a woman. That's just the nature of things. Whether you're actually, you know, it doesn't matter what part of the world, what country you're from, what district, what city, what part of the city you're from, how much money you've got in the bank, what sexual persuasion you are, you know, the colour of your skin, the colour of your hair, you know, all of these factors. We all have, you can say we fall into different categories with all of these things, but really we are all individuals and different, but we do have tendencies towards certain things, and there's always going to be the person that doesn't fit into, you know, you can't pigeonhole them into a certain category. You can't assume that just because my brother is a guy that he doesn't know how to parent, because, you know, his wife died a few years ago, in a tragic car accident, and since then he's had to learn how to be a successful parent with his 2 young kids, and is still learning and will continue to learn, I'm sure. So, you know, you can't make assumptions for each individual. Each individual is different, but nonetheless we do tend to fit into generalised categories, and by generalising we're not being sexist or racist or anything else-ist. You know, some people are religious and some people aren't religious. The people that are religious generally fall into certain categories. There's a set kind of almost a kind of, you know, there's a number of religions throughout the world. Generally that number doesn't increase or decrease. It does, obviously, over time, over millennia, that does increase or decrease, but you know, you can't say that just because someone's a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu that each individual person falls into a certain set boundaries within which they perform. Everyone's different, but generally Muslim men like to have a beard. Generally, most of the Hindus live in India. You know, most Christians go to church on a Sunday. These are all generalizations. Not all Christians go to church on a Sunday. Not all gay people are camp. That was quite an eye-opener for me. In fact, when I first moved to Manchester, and my girlfriend at the time was a dancer in gay clubs. That she was really good at dancing, and so she would be the girl on the podium dancing away to the house music on a podium in gay clubs. Lots of her friends were gay, so I was introduced in quite an abrupt, shocking way into the gay community, which I'd made terrible assumptions about before. You know, that all gay men had HIV, or that all gay men were camp, or that they're all bitches, or they all paint their fingernails. You know, anything, temperament, personality, appearance. You make assumptions about people, and as you get older and wiser, you realise that those assumptions, you can't generalise all the time. Everyone's different. There are just as many gay men that you wouldn't even know it when they walk past you in the street, because they're big and muscly and don't have an affected voice, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, so you can't make assumptions about people. You've got to don't just take people on face value all the time. So this is almost, in a way, it's kind of a, there's no need to be racist or sexist or to pigeonhole someone to the extent where we're making assumptions about them. You can generalise. You can generalise, for example, that most people that you see selling Big Issue on the street are homeless. And I imagine, I imagine that a large percentage of them are, but they're not all homeless. Some of them do have flats that are paid for. I don't know how it works, but they are still allowed to sell the Big Issue. You can't assume that all homeless people are eating badly. There's one guy that I know that sells the Big Issue, and he sort of saves up his money and goes to Marks and Spencer's. I've seen him coming out of Marks and Spencer's with a £4 steak and kidney pie, and fair play to him. If he's saving his money that he gets, the very meagre pennies and pounds that he gets, and spending it on a good quality pie instead of just going to Greg's, then fair enough. That's great. Good for him. I don't get much money either. Shut up, you cunt. Yeah, I don't get much money either. But I do spend what little I get on making sure that I eat really healthy, that I have a good balance in my diet, and that I don't just go to the cheap shop just because it's cheap. So we all make assumptions. You can generalise, generally, if that's the right, bad phrase to use perhaps, but you can generalise and make assumptions about groups of people, but each person is an individual. So I don't know, what's the point that I'm coming to? To give you another example, actually, that's just popped into my head. Normally when I was, before COVID, before everything was all crazy and all the shops were open, I used to go to work, teaching in a school, and would dress quite smartly. If I was going out for the night, I would dress smartly, smart jeans or trousers, a nice shirt or t-shirt, a nice hat, a jacket maybe, depending on the occasion, smart or smart casual. For a long time before that, I would just, if I was going to the pub, for example, I would put on my scruffy jeans with holes in, a scruffy unironed t-shirt, and trainers, and just a scruffy hat if it was cold, and that's how I'd go. I sometimes probably looked hardly any different to some of the homeless people that you see sitting at the side of the street. But then, a few years ago, I decided that, you only live once. If you can dress up smart, if you can afford to do it, or you can go to charity shops like I did, and hunt around for some good stuff, find a style that suits you, that suits your shape and your personality and your hairstyle and your size and height and all that sort of stuff. And I ended up dressing up smart to go to the pub. But that's only a fairly recent thing. I could pass sometimes in the past for a homeless guy. More recently, I could probably pass for someone that wasn't. It's just busy and people catching up with me. Not good. I don't want to be talking about this subject with people listening. Anyway, so there we go. yeah, so my example was a few weeks ago. As you know, I've been doing a lot of walking recently, and so by the very nature of the clothes and your attire when you decide to go out for a walk, especially in the north of England, Manchester, you need to go prepared. You need to have a hat, a woollyish sort of a warm hat, very similar to the things that I'm wearing now. I'm wearing trousers that suit getting muddy if I have to, and things to keep me warm. Nothing's ironed. It's just the nature of getting out and about and being prepared for all weathers, whether it's just going for a quick walk like I am today, or camping or hiking or whatever. So this is how I was dressed the other day. I went into Boots, I think it was, on the high street, and what I wanted to buy, don't laugh, okay, but what I wanted to buy was one of those foot machines that scrapes, almost like a sander that scrapes the hard skin off the bottom of your feet. Yeah, gross, I know, but I like to keep my feet nice and healthy. I don't want great big crustaceans growing up the sides of my ankles, so that's what I wanted to buy. I was pricing them up, in fairness, because a very good foot company called Scholl do a fairly expensive one, and Boots do their own home brand, which may or may not be as good, I don't know. Most of the time Boots stuff is, but I didn't know. So there I am, looking at the shelf, looking at the options, and picking things up, putting them back down again, and to cut a long story short, I could see that the security guard was actually looking at me. Every aisle that I went down, he'd suddenly be stood at the end of that aisle, giving me the evil. And all I wanted to do was just find a member of staff. You just can't find a member of staff these days in a shop to ask for advice and stuff. Not this Boots anyway, it was only a small one. In the big Boots you usually can find someone. So that's what I was just looking for, a bit of advice. Does this come with attachments? Does it come with spares? Spare sanding parts, or whatever you want to call them. And as I went to, in the end, I thought, sod it, I can probably find one cheaper online, direct from the actual company. And special offers, of course, too. Everyone's doing special offers on online shopping at the moment. So made my way to start going out the door, and I got stopped by the security guard and said, did you put that back on the shelf? The thing that you took off the shelf, is it in your pocket? So he was basically accusing me of stealing something from the shelves. He hadn't seen me take anything and put it in my pocket, but he was just making assumptions, and his assumptions were magnified probably by the fact that I looked like a scruffy urchin. I didn't have these camping trousers on. I don't know if you can see them. No, you can't really see them. But I didn't have these ones on. I had some other ones that I bought several years ago when I was a bit of a fatty. So they were particularly, old cool blimey trousers, and I looked like a scruffy urchin, and I don't blame him in a way. But he made assumptions. He made assumptions that I was homeless or very poor or from a poor background, and that I was nicking stuff from the shelves, which I absolutely wasn't. That's not who I am. In a way, I don't blame him, but I was, of course, at the time a little furious that he'd singled me out for those reasons. I can see both sides of the coin here. Can you? Do you see where I'm coming from? We all make these assumptions, and I don't blame him for it. But actually, you need to see someone nicking stuff and then trying to exit through the shop door before you can do anything. But there we go. So, what's the moral of this story? Well, quickly tie it into other occasions where I've gone to Marks and Spencer's, for example, which is quite a medium to high range clothes and food shop in the UK, chain, and if I go in straight from work, dressed very smartly, or wearing my fedora or a suit jacket or something like that, I'm much less likely to be followed around the shop than when I go dressed like this. So, you know, you can tell I am the same person. If I was gonna nick something, I would nick something whether I was dressed smartly or scruffily. But I'm not that kind of person. Yeah, so we all make these assumptions about people, and you know, I mean, just going back to my family again for briefly, you can't assume that. Well, I mean, look at my hair. Okay, so you can see that my hair is predominantly grey or silver, as I like to call it. But you can't assume that I'm an old git, that I'm an old codger just because I've got grey hair. My brother's gone completely the opposite way and is bald. You know, at least he's got so little hair that he may as well shave it off rather than looking like a Bobby Charlton. You also can't assume just because a guy, for example, just has a shaven head that it's because he's balding, because there's plenty of people out there, plenty of men that shave their head just because that's the way that they like to look, or it suits them best. So you can't make assumptions about people. We do, it's human nature to generalize about stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know, unless it's done with malice and you're being sexist or being racist. It's just the way we are, it's the way we're built. Of course, having said that, there are always people that will try and take advantage of your prejudices. Is it because I'm black? Is it because I'm gay that you're behaving or saying these in this way, or behaving in this way or saying these things? Is it because I've got grey hair that you're assuming that I'm 65 when actually I'm 50? You know, is it because I'm dressed scruffily that you're assuming that that I'm gonna nick something from your shop, and kicking off about it? You know, kicking off in a way that isn't calm and mature and thinking the process through, and that seems to be more and more prevalent in our society. We seem to be creating groups of people that assume certain things. So, for example, in the news recently, okay, but you're probably aware that I try and stay away from reading or listening to or watching the news as much as possible, because I think it's just the media, and it's just full of bullshit and tries to paint a certain picture that whoever the powers that be just want us all to fall into place and believe it all. But just a few days ago, I think it was, you know, even if you don't watch or listen to the news like me, you still pick it up. I mean, I still shop in Marks and Spencer's the other day, and when I'm queuing to pay for my goods, there I am waiting, and the newspapers are on the rack there. So, I mean, I only found out belatedly yesterday that it was Mother's Day, for Christ's sake. Sorry, Mum. It's usually like the end of the month, isn't it? But you know what I'm saying is, I realise that I do sort of catch glimpses of what's going on through, you know, just situations like that, and I noticed that in the news, in the media at least, that there was a police, was he a police constable or someone fairly high up, I think, in the police force, now has been taken in and is being questioned for murder of a woman. And it seems like there was an outcry about that. Oh God, you can't assume just because one guy that's hit the news has supposedly murdered this woman, you can't suppose or assume that all men just want to murder women. It's ridiculous. And then so suddenly it all flares up and you've got all these extremist women saying all men like this, and it just shows you how bad the patriarchy and how bad men are for the way that they think and act and behave. Ridiculous. Most men, the majority of men that I've met in my life, and that's thousands, wouldn't even think about murdering someone or battering someone, and that's from me. And I come from a family where my dad was like that. My dad was an absolute tyrannical leader in our family, and it was horrible. My childhood was, and my brother and sister and my mum, we grew up under that kind of, with that threat of violence and emotional and physical torture. So there are people like that in society, but you can't paint the picture and say that everyone's like that. Not all men want to murder people. You can't just suddenly flash the headlines with that. And then saying, the last few days it's been like the police have been clashing with protesters that are peacefully holding vigils for the murdered woman. Fine, but you should be holding a vigil whether it's a man or a woman that's been murdered, and a man or a woman that's done the murdering. It's just crazy. I talked about my dad, but actually, another part of my life which I haven't really talked about a lot is I had an ex-girlfriend and I was with her for I think 2.5, 3 years kind of thing, and at the beginning the relationship was really good, but towards the end of the first year, and certainly in the second year, I started to realise that she wasn't properly wired upstairs. There was a couple of connections missing, and when I finally plucked up the courage and told her, I don't think this is working out, she went and got drunk, and then came home and tried to stab me. It's not just men that resort to violence sometimes, to try and resolve situations. Men and women do. So come on, society, stop blaming men for everything. It's damaging to men. We need to. We're all just as much right to be on this planet as anybody else, and we need to stop having prejudices and putting people into categories or boxes just because of the colour of their skin or their sexual orientation or how tall or short they are or what clothes they wear or what religion they believe in. We need to stop making these blanket assumptions about everybody in certain groups. Everyone's different. There are generalisations to be made, so we need to stop blaming, in this case, men for being absolute wankers, because we're not all wankers.